Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new build in my series, Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Wizard Kitten, and I do a lot of Nancy Drew content and Sims 4 content, and a lot of content that brings the two together, and this series is one of those kinds of videos. So in this series, it's my goal to build at least one build from every Nancy Drew computer game in The Sims 4. But today's build is a little bit outside of that theme because this is the second build I'm doing from one particular game, and that game is Midnight in Salem. Now, the reason that I'm doing multiple builds for Midnight in Salem is because I think that the locations in Midnight in Salem were extremely disappointing, and I wanted them to be better. So I already did the Perry house. I did a recreation of what I think that the Perry house should have looked like in Midnight in Salem. And this here is a recreation of what I think Luminous Infusions, the tea shop, should have looked like in Midnight in Salem. I just think the ideas for the locations was very cool, but most of them were executed in such a boring way. The graphics are so bad that they just didn't look natural. They didn't look like they had any depth to them. They're not really interactive at all. So I decided to give Luminous Infusions a makeover. And bonus, I'm also giving Olivia Ravencroft's shop a makeover. And I added a whole new location that I think should have also been in the game. But we'll get to that part when we come to it. This is the first build, or the first part of this building that I'm doing. So what I decided to do, when we go into the town in Midnight in Salem, there's kind of like this nice little town square kind of thing where you can go into different areas. There's the museum, there's Luminous Infusions, there's the courthouse. So there's these different places that you can go in. So I wanted to go with still a downtown inspired theme, and you'll notice that these are completely different than the builds that we actually see in Midnight in Salem. So I was inspired, but I went completely on my own here, and I did what I wish that they would have looked like and designed them in a way that I think would have given them a lot more character. So for example, on this middle build, what you're seeing is Olivia Ravencroft's shop. So I use these really fancy stained glass windows with the moons, all of the stuff from the Realm of Magic pack I basically used to decorate Olivia's shop. And I really liked the idea of all of the shops being connected in kind of like a big city style of building. This is what I see in basically any big city that I've ever been in. If you go to a downtown area or like the historical area of a town, the shops and the buildings have these different sorts of bricks. It's like you can tell that they were made at different times, but they're all connected to each other. I love how that looks. I think it's fantastic, and I loved the idea of Lauren and Olivia needing to put up with each other and having their shops directly next to each other. You'll notice that outside of Olivia's shop there, I put a rocking chair and kind of that candle thing. So I figured if it was a slower day and she didn't have any customers, for example, she'd probably sit out there and she would like be shuffling her tarot cards or like be holding a crystal ball, and she would be attempting to lure customers into her shop. And I feel like she would periodically like put her rocking chair over on the other side of the door so that it's starting to block Lauren's shop, and then they would have all of these little tiffs. Like they would get so annoyed with each other because their things would be in front of each other's shops, and Olivia would be like, oh, you don't want to go into Luminous Infusions, come into my shop, and then Lauren would do the same thing. I just think that would have given them a lot more character, and it would have been really fun to see them kind of arguing with each other in that way. And then this shop way on the end is going to end up being a used bookstore. And again, I have ideas for that, but I'll share that when we actually start working on that part. Right here, though, I'm working on the exterior and just trying to give each shop its own little vibe, using lots of the get-together items, lots of get-to-work items, to try and make each of the shops look like a nice little downtown store, super inviting, lots of fun colors, and I made sure to do this build in autumn. So with The Sims 4 Seasons, I have it on autumn right now. It's just turning to autumn, so the leaves are just starting to have that nice gold. The sun has kind of that orangish glow to it. I've been wanting to do more and more autumn builds because now that August has hit, I am so ready for autumn. I'm really not a huge summer fan. I like the summer because it's my one time out of the year where I can actually kind of do these videos more frequently, where I can kind of just relax and be myself rather than my day job, because I'm a speech therapist and I work in a school system, so I have the summers off. But the weather in the summer is just not my vibe. I don't like being hot. I don't like being sweaty. I would much rather have a nice cool autumn breeze where I can cuddle up in a big old cardigan and get cozy with my weighted blanket without just like getting exhaustedly warm. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of summer weather. So I have been very much enjoying doing some autumn builds and getting more in the fall spirit. So this was very therapeutic in that sense. I'm kind of working out finishing the architecture. I wanted to make sure that all of the buildings had this second level so you could go up to a second level and see more different kinds of things, especially for the Luminous Infusions tea shop. This was very important to me because I figured there would be a really nice sitting area up at the top, and then down on the lower level would be where you order your tea, order your coffee, order your infusion of whatever sort, and then you would go up to the upper level to drink your tea, hang out with a book, do whatever you like, and then there's a shop on the lower level. So the issue that I have with Luminous Infusions in Midnight in Salem, first of all, everything looks really crappy. Like, there's no shadowing on any of the items that you can buy in the store. Everything looks super flat, and they just repeat the same items over and over again, and you can't interact with any of the items either. I can't buy a donut from the bakery shelf. I can't buy a tea or anything like that. I can't look at any of the things that Lauren is selling in her shop. So my idea with this shop was to keep the same kind of vibe. It's kind of more like almost a hipstery kind of feel to it. There's lots of industrial elements. It's got exposed bricks, and then I painted some of the bricks black just to give it a deeper feel. There's lots of iron elements, lots of rope elements, and when I start to fill in the shelves too, I try to include that as well. This right here is the coffee and tea station, so I decided to kind of put the teas on the edge of the shelves here so that Nancy could walk into the shop and then she could see all of these different brews that Lauren has, and she could like perhaps buy a tea and then experience the effects of that tea. I thought that would be super fun. It's kind of like the powders that you get in Zeke's Curio Shop in Legend of the Crystal Skull, how Bess can go in there and she can like smell the sneezing powder and she sneezes, or she can smell the crying powder and it makes her cry. I really think that would have been kind of a fun little element to do with the tea shop, because Lauren's teas are supposed to have certain effects, like you're supposed to drink them for certain ailments, and I think that would have been fun to explore a little bit more. So I have all of those teas out there. That's my idea for those. So Nancy would have actually gotten to interact with those. And then over in this corner is just kind of a standard teapot. So this would be just like if you want to do a refill or something, you need to boil some water. There's a little microwave so you can heat up a croissant, a pastry of some sort, anything like that. And then just a couple of other little coffee and tea knickknacks, like maybe a little milk thing so you could put some milk in your coffee, some sugar, some little add-ins, cinnamon, whatever you want to add in your tea. I think that Lauren would have a bunch of little options, so that's why I put the little spice rack there. You're periodically seeing me pull out a bunch of different things, just a bunch of little knickknacks, and that's because the catalog in The Sims 4 is so dense and so full of items that sometimes it helps to just kind of scroll through it and pull out certain things that you think will look good. So it's like, okay, I found a vintage looking tea set. Lauren would probably have that somewhere in the shop, right? So then as far as the actual little shop area, I wanted to make sure that I had a bunch of different surfaces, so like rustic kind of wood surfaces. I use these wonderful windows from the Moschino stuff pack. That's kind of the reason that I got the Moschino stuff pack, was so that I could have these windows, essentially, because I love these windows and I think they're great and I think they work beautifully for the vibe that I was going for Luminous Infusions. And now we're adding in kind of the different surfaces I was talking about and doing the upper level for the cafe area. So I figured that Lauren would have tons of plants around, and how fun would it actually be if those plants up on that upper level were herbs that Lauren uses in her mix. So for example, there's basil up there, or there's mint up there, or there's rosemary up there. And for the tea making puzzle, like Nancy, there could be an option where Nancy could go up there and actually search for the different kinds of herbs, and she has to identify them that way, and then she has to bring them down and make the tea that way. That just feels more interactive. It would give us more to do. It would add more puzzles to this game. If you've played the game, you know that it's kind of puzzle-less. There's very few puzzles. And now I'm adding a few more decorations and trying to think of different items that Lauren would sell in this shop. So basically in the one that we see in Midnight in Salem, all she really sells is what looks like bags of tea and some pastries. But that doesn't have a whole ton of character, and again, we can't interact with any of that stuff anyway. So I figured that she would sell more than just bags of tea that all look the same. It all kind of just looks like a generic Starbucks bag, which is kind of boring. Also, like, I want really interesting brews. I want to look at these bags of tea and be like, blueberry, acai, and cinnamon tea for indigestion. I don't know. I wanted it to be more unique and more interesting. I also added this little nectar station, so I have a feeling that she would like get some really good nectars as well. In The Sims 4, wine is called nectar, but I kind of like the idea that she would call it nectar anyway. Like, it wouldn't be wine to her, it would be actual like nectar from flowers. And I use these little signs, so Nancy would look at these signs and read them and be like, oh, okay, this is the wildflower liqueur. And you're supposed to like drink this wildflower liqueur. And then I have these fancy little teapots, and I have a feeling that like depending on the kind of teapot you use, that would influence the brew that you make, for example. So I don't know, maybe the dark teapot is for your darker brews where you have darker intentions, and the lighter teapots are for when you have lighter intentions. I just wanted it to have a much more mystical feel, and I wanted a lot more thought to be put into Luminous Infusions because the idea is so fun. The idea of this kind of shop is absolutely a place that I would want to go to in real life, but then the actual execution of it in Midnight in Salem was just so disappointing to me. So this is me trying to throw as much character as I possibly can into it. What you're seeing me do here is, so I sized down these retail tables because I wanted to put them on the table to give them a little bit more depth. So I sized them down, but their slots ended up being in the exact same place. So their slots were actually in the air. So what I end up having to do is do a bunch of move objects on. I have to do a bunch of different things to really bring the items down and get them to actually fit on the shelves in a normal way. I do end up cutting some of that out, but what you're seeing here is me going in and getting some honey because I figured that Lauren would totally sell locally sourced organic honey in her shop. She would probably use it in her tea and she would probably sell it as well. And again, different kinds of honey because I don't know very much about honey, but the little that I understand is that depending on the flowers that the bees are using when they're making their honey, or that the bees are getting pollen from when they're making their honey, that can affect how the honey tastes. Like there's clover honey and there's wildflower honey and there's just different varieties. So I figured Lauren would have all of those different varieties, again, organically sourced, really yummy honey. So here is where I'm going to just kind of skip ahead so you don't have to watch me doing all of this placement. But I also decided to put a bunch of fun candles on there. So those are 100% soy wax and beeswax candles with all of these fun little designs. And each color candle is used for a different purpose. So that's a very magical idea, is that like certain colors of candles, when you burn them, are used in different kinds of like rituals and things. I know very little about it, but that's the idea. So I figured she would sell all of these really cool candles. I loved that idea. And then in the middle here, I put a bunch of the fizzy juices. And the fizzy juices are basically like kombucha in The Sims, essentially. So, and these ones each have a different emotion purpose. So one of them is for focus, one of them is for inspiration, one of them is for happiness, and all of those sorts of things, which that felt perfect for Lauren's shop. So this is like the modern apothecary vibe that I think that her shop should have had. So we could actually go over to these items and be like, oh, now I get what you mean by a modern apothecary. Like, you have all of these things that are supposed to help with your mindset and your body, but they're packaged in this really cool modern way. And that's the similar thing with all of these herbalism potions that I'm putting down. So these aren't potions, but they're like lotions and things. And again, each one is supposed to have a different purpose in The Sims. One reduces rage, one gets rid of bug bites, one is good for indigestion. And I just loved the idea of having these in the shop, having them around for Nancy to look at, for Nancy to buy, to talk about. This is what I think a modern apothecary should look like, and this is what I think a modern apothecary should sell, and what you should be able to look at and talk about with Lauren in the shop. Because we really don't get to talk to her all that much about what quote-unquote modern magic would look like in this setting. And I think that was a missed opportunity. That could have given a lot more depth to Lauren's character. It could have made her a lot more interesting, because it's a cool idea. It's a cool spin to be like, no, I'm doing modern magic. This is a different thing. And then you go next door and you have Olivia, who's doing like old school magic. I added these books too, and all of these I chose specifically because they were more like modern magic-y type ideas. So it's more like how to brew your tea a certain way, and moon phases and astrology and stuff like that. I thought about putting this line here, but I couldn't get it to be the right size where it wouldn't block people from actually getting out of the tea line. So I decided to just not have that there. I figured they would make their own line anyway. It's a pretty small shop, so people would just have to be smart enough to find their own way. I also didn't want to block the sight lines too much because I was really liking how this was looking. I did end up adding a little bit of a table down here though, just in case people needed to wait, or people couldn't really go up the stairs super easily but still wanted a place to sit. That was kind of the idea with that. And I put lots of candles around, lots of flowers, again, lots of industrial elements. I'm just really, really happy with how this shop turned out. I had a lot of fun making this. This is totally a place that I would want to visit in real life. So you guys have to let me know in the comments down below if you like how this turned out. Would you have liked this version of Luminous Infusions better? Do you think it maybe doesn't make that much of a difference? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it as well. But regardless, I just had a lot of fun letting my creativity run wild in this place. It was so fun to just put all of these elements together in a way that I thought looked good. I love doing the Nancy Drew recreations, but I think what's even more fun for me is when I can take a Nancy Drew inspired idea and then put my own flair on it, because that really allows my creativity to run wild. So like in certain builds where we see maybe just the living room, and then I can craft a whole house around that same style and be like, okay, this is what Maddie's living room looks like. What does the rest of Maddie Jensen's apartment look like? I'll try and remember to link my entire build playlist to this video as well. I've done quite a few builds now, and we're actually doing pretty well on finishing up games. I think, gosh, how many games have we done now? I've done a lot of the earlier games. I've done several of the really big builds, like Ramsey Hall from Mornings at Waverly Academy, the Golden Gardenia for Message in a Haunted Mansion, but I do still have a couple of really big, intimidating builds to do, which is totally fine. I mean, those are going to be really exciting, but we shall see. Eventually, I will get them all. It's like Pokemon. Eventually, I will catch them all. Eventually, I will build them all. I wanted to make sure that the back of the build too just had a couple things going on. I didn't add too much detail back here, but I liked the idea of there being like a dumpster back here and a couple trash cans. So, I mean, even Nancy likes to rummage around and find clues. It's definitely possible that she would go back there and like dig through the trash and see if she could find something sneaky. On this third level, I decided to just black these out. I wanted the buildings to be taller purely for aesthetic reasons on the outside. I kind of figured that these would probably be studio apartments, not necessarily for the people who live here, because we have an idea. I mean, Lauren already has her own house. Olivia probably has her own place somewhere as well, but there could be residents in Salem who live on the third floor of these buildings. I've definitely seen that before. I'm not super familiar with big cities, but I know it's like fairly common for people to like live above a pizza parlor. I guess I'm thinking of like Julie and Julia, the movie, and how they live above a pizza parlor, but they don't own the pizza parlor, they just live there. So that's kind of my idea with that, and I just wanted the buildings to be taller because I liked how it looked. Gave it a little bit more dimension that I was looking for and more of that kind of vibe. I did build this in Brightchester as well. This is the university world in The Sims 4, and this is more the well, I guess this isn't necessarily connected to the University of Brightchester. This is more in between the two universities, and it's just kind of like the college town, I suppose. So that was more the idea with that, is that I wanted it to kind of look more like the buildings that are around it, and all of those buildings have lots of brick accents and are very tall. So that was kind of the point with that. I had a lot of fun trying to get the buildings to look nice together, but also still have their own very distinct styles. And I kind of did that by making sure that all of the buildings had black accented windows and doors, but they were each in slightly different styles. So again, the one for Olivia's shop is very stained glass, lots of moon elements, kind of mysterious. The one for the bookstore here has bigger windows so you can kind of see in and look at all of the books and see if you might want to go in here. So now that we're working on the bookstore here, I can talk about my idea for the bookstore. So if you saw my top 10 worst characters video, I'll try and remember to put a card for that as well. You know that I'm not a big fan of one of the characters in this game. So I decided to just kind of eliminate that character because we don't need them. They're not important. They add absolutely nothing to this mystery. And in place of that character, I'm making my own. And they are the proprietor, the runner of this bookstore. So this is a used bookstore, which I think is just always a good idea to have in a game. And I decided that the owner of this bookstore, his name is Mr. Griggs, Mr. Henry Griggs, and he's just like this really sweet older man. He's probably like in his 70s, and he's retired. He had kind of your normal job, but now he runs this used bookstore. This is really his passion, is being around books rather than what his day job was before. He was probably like an accountant or something before, but now he runs this bookstore and he absolutely loves it. But Mr. Griggs is kind of a nervous guy. He doesn't really like to talk. He's much more comfortable being surrounded by his books than he is being surrounded by people. So of course, Nancy and Deirdre coming in here with their very strong personalities and asking him a ton of questions is gonna just like freak this poor man out, and he's not gonna like it at all. But they need to ask him a bunch of questions, because what better place to find mysterious books and information than a used bookstore? So rather than Nancy just randomly being given things by characters or finding a book in wherever she went, was she in the Ukraine? Where was she? I can't even remember what country she was in when she started this mystery. It doesn't make sense to me to begin with, but rather than having to go all the way there to find this book of secrets, like maybe Mr. Griggs comes across it accidentally. Somebody like sells it to him and he has no idea what he actually has. He doesn't realize what kind of a book this is, but it's just in the shelves in his little bookstore here. I liked that idea so much more. We could find a bunch of books in here that tell us more about Salem. We could find just books on magic. We could find anything in here that would help us actually learn something in this mystery. It's one of the biggest problems I had with Midnight in Salem, is that I learned nothing about Salem and its witch trials and its history, which is super disappointing because it sounds extremely interesting. So what I'm doing here is I'm just putting a bunch of book stacks of different books that Sims can buy. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed kind of setting up this little station here and trying to make it look good. I put a couple of these fun little book decals in the window. This feels, again, very similar to used bookstores that I've been in before. I wanted it to feel just the right amount of cluttered. I think Mr. Griggs is a pretty neat man. I think he likes to keep his bookstore as clean as he can, but it's not always easy when you have a ton of books. This little center in the middle, he has obviously added because it's very modern looking. It's just kind of a new shelf where he can add in a couple more books on this bottom level without cluttering things up too much. And then I do put a couple of cute little knit stuffed animals down there. I don't know if he knits them or if he purchases them from somebody who can knit in the area, but I loved the idea of having little stuffed animals as like little reading buddies that you could purchase in here, like these cute little turtles. Who wouldn't want a little turtle reading buddy? And on the other side, I put a little knit octopus. I just think it's so adorable, so cute. So that was kind of my ideal with that. I also imagine that Mr. Griggs has a cat, like he has probably a ragdoll cat. I'm thinking real fluffy cat, a la Yuri from Secret of the Old Clock, but executed much more effectively. And I put this chair down here because this is the chair where his cat likes to hang out. So you can interact with the cat. The cat likes to chill there. Cat doesn't really serve any other purpose except being adorable and giving Mr. Griggs some more personality, because when you give characters families and pets and things like that, it instantly gives them more relatability and makes them feel like much more real people. Instantly, even with that, even though this person is not a real person, I already feel like they're more important than the character who shall not be named from that video. If you want to know who I'm talking about, you could watch the video. I don't want to spoil it for you. So yeah, I really liked the idea of having this little bookstore. I thought it would be super cute and just give us another place to explore, give another place that actually has some function in the game. I imagine that Mr. Griggs wears kind of like a tweed kind of look, like he's got a tweed jacket and it's a little bit oversized on him, like it's a little bit too big, but he wears this matching tweed suit every day, and he has these big round glasses that kind of magnify his eyes a little bit more than they should, so he has kind of these big bulging eyes. It's just kind of the idea that I had for him. I like to think about characters in depth. Midnight in Salem did not like to think about characters in depth, so I made my own, gosh darn it. Now I'm just trying to add a couple more books on this upper level, trying to fill it in with a variety of different bookshelves. This one has some glass encased books, so these would be like the super old books, like, oh look, books from the 17th century. I wonder what could be in here. Oh, books from the 16th century. Like, whoa, these are super old. I wonder if there's anything interesting in them. Like, I don't know, secret information about witches or something like that Mr. Griggs didn't really know that he had. You know, something interesting, something mysterious. Midnight in Salem could never. And then I added this nice little reading nook here with the red chair. I absolutely adore that chair from Cats and Dogs. If I ever find a chair like that in real life, I will absolutely be purchasing it for myself, especially if it has a matching ottoman like that. Yes, please. I would absolutely adore that. I think we're done with the bookshelf now. Yes, so now we're going to move on to doing Olivia Ravencroft's shop. Now, similar to Lauren's shop, I was super disappointed with Olivia's shop. It does not seem mysterious at all. So in Midnight in Salem, it's connected to the museum, first of all, which I think is weird because the museum is supposed to be specifically relating to historical fact regarding Salem. And then you have Olivia here who's like, I'm a modern day witch. Like, I do witch hunts and I tell you about the history of witches, not really the history of Salem, but like witch specific and magic specific. So I thought it was weird that it was attached to the museum in the first place. So again, I give it its own place. Now it has a more reasonable place. It shouldn't be the souvenir shop for the museum, I guess is what I'm saying. That doesn't seem to fit at all. In terms of, like, there might be a couple things in the museum that would have kind of more magic-y elements to them, but I think in general it would be a lot more like knowledge-based. So I decided Olivia had her own shop here. It's very moon inspired, lots of dark colors, lots of purples, lots of celestial type elements, and basically everything from the Realm of Magic game pack I used in this build. So these little cabinets with curios and potions and wands and plants and just everything that you would need to be a witch. I put a bunch of brooms on this wall, so this is a little broom display where you can buy a witch's broom. Like, how fun would that be? Olivia's shop has the exact same problem as Lauren's shop, where you walk in there, all of the items have no shadowing on them, so they look incredibly fake, and you can't interact with any of them. I can't go over and be like, oh, what's this? Oh, that's pretty cool. It's like a familiar. That's really neat. I like that idea. How cool. Or, oh, look, this is a wand. Let's play around with the wands. That sounds fun. No, we can't do any of that. We walk in there and we can look around sort of at things, but never interact with any of them, never touch any of them, and never learn anything. So that's what this build is hopefully fixing. I'm putting a bunch of different wands in these wand boxes here, so you can get a bunch of different wands at this shop. I'm also adding in a bunch of, again, little tables because I wanted to try and keep the displays varied. I wanted them to look kind of natural and more real. These are also technically brooms, but I thought they looked more like staffs. So like rather than just a regular wand, you could have a wizard staff. So I decided that that's kind of what those were instead. They have crystals on them. So again, different crystals would result in different kinds of magic is the idea. And then I have these stacks of books here that are supposed to be different kind of magical books, these different tomes of things that you could read. So again, Olivia would be selling these things. Nancy could look at them and kind of page through them, learn some things about magic and how it's quote unquote practice. And then she could talk to Olivia about it. And again, actually learn something. What a novel idea, actually learning something in a Nancy Drew game. I'm throwing a lot of shade at Midnight in Salem. If you've seen my review of Midnight in Salem or seen any of my previous videos, you're probably not surprised, but yeah. So over here I put this little cauldron. The cauldrons are super fun because they bubble and they make little shapes come out of them, which is super cool. I loved that idea. Up on the upper level, I'm making sure to put in my favorite moon rug that came from the Realm of Magic pack. I've used it in 2 other builds now. I think I used it in Abby's room in Message in a Haunted Mansion, and I used it in Mel's room in Warnings at Waverly Academy. It's just a fantastic moon rug for that kind of personality. I think it worked perfectly for Olivia Ravencroft as well. And now I'm constructing a potions shelf. So again, this would be a shelf that you could actually interact with. So Nancy could come over and she could look at some of these potions. She could maybe buy some of these potions and try them out on people. Like rather than randomly giving them pancakes, which I still don't fully understand, like why are we giving them pancakes? Rather than doing that, how about we like give them a potion and be like, hey, want to try this energy potion? Tell me if it works. Want to try this potion of euphoria and see if you feel happier afterwards? Like that just sounds a lot more interesting. Or Nancy could like sneakily give it to people, or she could try them herself. That sounds a lot more fun. And then actually learn a little bit about what potion making is supposed to be like, the history of it. Like, do people still do this? Where did it come from? How do you do it? What are the different aspects of potion making that have survived into the modern day? That kind of stuff would be so much more interesting. And its connection to modern medicine, yeah, I want to learn. I want to learn when I play these games. These potions are also super fun because they also have little spurts of shapes and bubbles and stuff and sparks coming out of them when the game is animated when you're in live mode, so they look super cool, which is a lot of fun. And then again, some more moon kinds of artwork. I put the broom and the mop in here as well. The broom and the mop are actually functional brooms for your spellcaster sims, which is pretty funny because they just look like your standard broom and mop, but your spellcaster sims can ride those. I imagine that Olivia just uses them for cleaning though. Over here, I'm making a familiar display. So each of these little orbs is a different familiar that your spellcaster sims can purchase. And there's like a dragon one. I know there's a fairy one. There's a couple others, but they're basically little creatures that follow your spellcaster sims around and make your spellcaster sims' life easier. And I love the idea of Olivia selling something like that. Like, even if she were to pretend that every single one of those like had a little fairy in them, and she would just sell them to people, and even if they were just like you plug it in and it glows that color or something, or it's a Himalayan salt lamp and it has that kind of thing to it. Just the idea that she would sell those kinds of things makes so much sense to me and would have given the shop so much more character, would have been a lot more fun to look at and talk to her about. I just like that so much more. So now I'm adding a couple more shelves up here, but we're starting to get close to the end of the build. I hope you guys enjoyed this one because, like I said, this is probably one of my favorites so far of the builds that I've done, just because I really got to let my creativity flow in this one. I got to kind of do whatever I wanted with it because I wasn't even going to attempt to try and make the regular Luminous Infusions the way it looks in the game because I didn't like how it looked. So here's my own. Adding a bunch of cauldrons. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this build. Let me know what other builds that you would like to see. I, again, am working my way through all of the games. This was more just I needed a fall fix, so here's my another Midnight in Salem build. I do also want to build the Hathorn house from Midnight in Salem and make that much better, but I have a lot of research I need to do for that one because I actually want to make it good, unlike what the Her Interactive team did. So, yeah. Doing some research for that one. But let me know what other builds you would like to see. Please feel free to give this video a little thumbs up if you liked it and want to see more like it. I would absolutely love, love, love it if you were willing to subscribe to the channel. We're super close to 500 fellow detectives now, which makes me super excited. I love sharing this kind of content with you guys, and the fact that you guys love it too makes it so worthwhile, makes it so much more fun to do these kinds of things when I actually get to share them with people. So yeah. I also added in this little jack-o'-lantern station. So rather than making jack-o'-lanterns at the desk in the museum, which is random, again, I don't understand why it's in the museum, you can make them in Olivia's shop, and then you can like purchase your own jack-o'-lantern or make your own jack-o'-lantern. I'm sure she has a stock of pumpkins nearby at all times. That's just something that Olivia would do. Coming up on the screenshots here in just a few minutes. If you're interested in more kind of content, more interaction with this channel, the channel is on Instagram, WizardKittenYT. You can follow me there. We do also have a Discord, which will be linked in the description of this video. Super supportive community of a bunch of wonderful fellow detectives. It's genuinely a very happy, positive space. So you can join that as well if you're interested. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.